Conceive, believe, achieve.
This is former UFC middleweight champion of the world, Michael Bisping.
Paddy the Baddy here. You're listening to Combat Sports UK.
And you're watching Combat Sports UK.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to a very special edition of the Combat Sports UK MMA podcast. We've got a couple of these over the Christmas period, but it seems to be all the trend right now to do UFC 300 previews. So that is what we're here to do. I'm Taylor Collard. I'm joined by the Octagon Oracle himself, Nathan Shields, and John Gamebred Bogoslavsky. Gentlemen, how are we?
All good, mate. All good.
All good. All good here as well.
Good, right. Well, I apologize in advance for the audio listeners. We'll do the best we can to kind of annotate what we're talking about, but we're going to put up a little graphic now for those that are watching on YouTube showing the picks that we have made for UFC 300. I want to jump right in and just say, Nathan, you've got a bit of explaining to do for that main event right there. How on earth is Jon Jones and Stipe Miocic going to happen?
I just think it is. There's not really any massive breakdowns or surprising, takes on this. I know Jones has been out and he's obviously had the injury and whatnot, and they were talking about when he could be back. But if you remember, I think when Jon Jones actually took to Twitter after the injury, he said he was looking at being back training. I think it was something like March, something around there, which would suggest that he might be able to get ready for a fight at the end of April. But look, he's probably not. I've probably jumped the gun a little bit, but I just feel like UFC 300 needs to be massive. Like if we look at some of the fights that we're talking about that are going to be, further down the card, it needs to be something with a huge name at the top. So, I mean, we've got the lists in front of us there, but for me, I just felt like it needed a huge name. They were talking about Conor. Obviously, Conor's saying he's going to be later than that. But I'll be honest, it wouldn't surprise me at all if they pulled the pin and it was just a bit of they were playing games with us all and Conor ends up headlining. That wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. Yeah,
I mean, that's not been officially confirmed by the UFC, just by a half-cut Conor McGregor with a glass of wine sat doing his thing. I mean, kind of to caveat this, I think it's kind of interesting because of what Dana said. I think it was early December where he said, yeah, UFC 300 is going to be incredible. You're going to be looking at it thinking, how are these fights prelim fights? So that's what's kind of, I think, got everybody's juices flowing. We know that 200 was a big event. 100 was also a pretty big event where if I'm right in thinking George St. Pierre opened the card for UFC 300. So when you're talking about that kind of caliber, they've got to do something, especially with these boxing announcements as well. I feel like they've really got to try and blow us out of the water. Because around about the same time, you've got Fury Usyk, or is that February? And you've also got Joshua and Ngannou. So, Dana's competitive. He likes it. John, what do you make of Nathan's main event there?
Yeah, I just don't see that happening. Jones literally tore a pectoral muscle in November. That's like 3 months ago. So I did not see him being ready in April. That's too quick of a turnaround. I honestly just think he did that so Jones and Miocic happened so Aspinall could fight this year. As good as that main event is, I just don't see it's happening. It's too early. We talked about this in our preview for 2024. Jones will probably only fight after August of this year. It's just not happening, in my opinion.
Straight up,
that's a fair take. It's a fair take.
But it is fun. It'll be awesome to see that just to get out of the way finally. But it's very optimistical.
The biggest problem I had with picking the main event for UFC 300 was, like you said before, Taylor, Dana was talking about, the first card opener, it's going to blow your mind. Like, how are these guys opening the card? Which surprised me because then they announced Bo Nickel and Cody Brundage, which, if they're opening the card, that still doesn't necessarily blow my mind as far as a card goes, So, but as for the main event, I would just expect something absolutely massive. And, when we look at both of our lists, or all of our lists, sorry, there's not massive fights necessarily in some of them.
You even cut Nickel versus Brundage on your UC 300.
What, sorry?
Where does that go?
You cut Nickel and Brundage out of your UC card.
Or did I copy it wrong?
No, that was kind of away from what's already on it.
I see. Okay.
Hence the Oliveira Sarukian fight missing too.
So you've
True.
got
True. True.
full fantasy, full fantasy. I mean, yeah. The thing with that Jones Miocic, I totally agree with you, Nathan. That is the biggest fight the UFC could make. I think outside of Conor. Conor's a
Mhm.
draw, but it's
Name value wise,
yeah.
it's the biggest
Right.
fight.
Is it a big fight, that Conor Chandler fight? I'm not convinced it's a big fight as terms of what this is. Jones and Miocic, the legacy heavyweight championship. And just you've got the GOAT. You've got John Jones fighting, and he always brings numbers. It would probably be one of the most John Jones-y things to do is to come back at UFC 300 just out of nowhere, just come back
Yeah.
off the back of that injury. I mean, stranger things have happened. I think the closest comparison we've got is Yuri Prohashka. In terms of the similarity in injury, obviously not very similar, but they both did shoulders, didn't they? So, yeah, could it happen? I don't know. It would be nice. I think out of our three main events, for me, that's the biggest one. Jones and Miocic. Interesting about the placement. John and I have both got the same of Gaethje and Holloway. I guess you're talking BMF there, right, John?
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So why have you chosen that as your main event then?
I don't know. I just think UFC 300. He wants something big. He wants the main card to be a banger, and if you want people to watch, what better way to put Gaethje versus Max Holloway for the BMF? Holloway, let's agree here, he deserves to be in title contention for being the BMF belt, for as real or not real that is. Holloway comes to bang, Gaethje comes to bang. Holloway, former year featherweight champion, Gaethje, one of the most exciting fighters, and I think to finish off UFC 300, you'd want a banger like Gaethje versus Holloway. They've been going at it on Twitter. Not really at it, but like Holloway proposed it to Gaethje. I don't think Gaethje would be opposed to that. And especially with the news from yesterday that Oliveira and Sarukian is the title eliminator, Gaethje will actually sit around and wait for Sarukian and Oliveira to happen, and then Makhachev versus the winner of that to happen, especially knowing Makhachev only fights twice a year. If that happens, means Gaethje's not fighting for the whole year. I don't see that happening. I think he'll fight one time. It's going to be for the BMF, and I think Gaethje and Holloway is going to be fireworks.
Mm. See, I actually woke up almost to the news that Justin Gaethje wasn't getting that number one contender shot or a shot necessarily, that Islam was injured and that Charles Oliveira would be taking on Arman Sarukian, which I had two thoughts instantly. One was that's an incredible fight, and number two was what the hell's happening with Justin Gaethje then? And I kind of popped that in our group nice and early today, and then I immediately took to looking at rankings, big names in and around who could, because in my opinion, I think if you're doing a UFC 300, I think Max Holloway has to be on that card just for everything that Max has been, that he's done. It's kind of a reflection of the UFC between 200 to 300. And if you look at Max Holloway, he's been a pivotal part of that. So for me, you've got to have Max on there. But when I was looking at who could Max fight, there weren't that many options in his own division that he's not already either lost to multiple times or he's beaten them all. So it was a case of who can he fight, and then when I kind of put two and two together, and I thought, yeah, you're absolutely right. I can see Gaethje and Holloway being the way to go
As the main event.
Possibly. My only issue with it is that I think if they're doing a massive UFC 300 card, I think they're going to have a number of title shots, legit title fights on there, and I don't think it would be fair to a current champion to put the BMF belt higher than that. Same conversation with Conor kind of headlining something against Chandler and putting a title fight underneath it. The difference is that's Conor. You probably get away with it. I don't think you get away with it for any other reason.
That explains where I put it. I've gone for the 4 title fights. It's 3 really, because the BMF is kind of we don't know what kind of belt that is. So that's why I put it as kind of that second featured fight after the opener. Could I see it as a headline? I think I lean towards you there, Nathan. I think you can't have it over a legitimate belt like a Leon and Bilal. I don't think Leon and Bilal is the headliner for UFC 300. I think if that is the headliner, your pay-per-view, you need some fights underneath that to make it a seller. Because
Yeah.
I think
That
historically neither of them really are draws.
No, I
that's
thought
why
with all due respect to Leon and Bilal, Oliveira and Sarukian's a better fight.
yes, that's why I
Yeah, more
put Holloway
entertaining.
and Gaethje in front of them on my list because I feel
Yeah.
like people will be more excited to watch Gaethje's Holloway than Bilal and Leon.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
yeah,
I
it
agree.
just as fake as a BMF belt is, I think people still watch it, especially with some people having the event of the year last year was that Gaethje versus Poirier card for the BMF.
The, do you know, the thing is that you've heard numerous people talk about the BMF belt. You've talked about Kamaru Usman, when he was having his fights with Masvidal and things like that. And for me, there's a certain criteria of BMFs, and Justin Gaethje and Max Holloway both are definitely on that list. They both qualify for the opportunity to fight for that belt. So yes, it's a bit of a gimmick, but those are two guys. They are two of the baddest motherfuckers going. So
Yeah,
the concept of those two squaring off is absolutely okay with me.
yeah, and I feel like that fight is a layup. I mean, all three of us have got it. All three of us have got that fight. Which I mean, just looking at it right now, I don't think we've all got something similar apart from Leon and Bilal, which is pretty much confirmed, and the other confirmed fights. I think it's a layup for the UFC. I think you do it. I just think card placement is going to be an interesting one. Could you do UFC 300 on the back of it? I'm not 100% sure. I do think you need something a bit bigger, which is why I've gone Pereira and Izzy 3. I think there's a reason. I think if you're looking to book Alex Pereira, he stays active. I mean, he fought 3 times last year, one loss, and then the 2 wins, obviously finishing in November. So he's pretty active. There's no rumors that he's injured or anything like that. So they're keeping him in the background for something. I think it's got to be UFC 300. Otherwise, what else are you going to do with the names that are around? And then Izzy, for me, it's just a fight that makes sense. Whether Izzy's out, whatever's going on with him mentally, he's probably, along with Sean O'Malley, probably the biggest pay-per-view draw outside of John Jones and Conor McGregor worldwide. So globally, I think Izzy's got that reach, and I think it's the fight. It's a fight you do as a headline. I think I don't see why you wouldn't do it unless Izzy is adamant that he is staying out. Who else are you going to put? Pereira against Jamal Hill, like you put Nathan? I mean, we don't know too much about Jamal Hill, really. John, you haven't even gone for Pereira on the card, right? So you're just like, nah, he's out.
I don't know what's happening with him. I think he went through a breakup recently and a fight
Doesn't
could,
look like it's troubling him too much.
yeah. I hope he's not watching this, but I don't know what's happening with him. I just want him. I want him to fight for sure. The only logical fight Dana confirmed it is him to fight versus Hill. It's the question is Hill ready? A bunch of just injuries sucks, of course. Is Hill ready? Obviously, if he's not, I would love to see somebody else get in the title shot. But with Yuri and Rakic confirmed for this card, and it does make sense for like perfect timing. The winner of that could fight the winner of Pereira and whoever he faces. Whoever else could be in that light heavyweight contender. I don't know. We have Ankalaev fighting this weekend versus Walker. So we're not it's not too sure. I went for the win. I went for the safe picks. I'm like I want to look back after C300 gets announced. We're like, wow, John, you were right.
I hope that if that's the card that's announced, I hope I'm looking back saying, for God's sake, John. That's a. I mean, just to comment on your Izzy Pereira pick, Taylor. The reason I don't see it happening is because I'm not sure too many people are interested in seeing Izzy come back against Pereira after losing to Sean Strickland. I think he has to return and get a win first.
Okay.
Especially if he's going to do it up at 205. I mean, going up to 205 to face Pereira is a risky game for someone who's knocked you out in the weight division below. You're just playing into Pereira's hands, I feel, in that. So I'd be surprised to see him come off a defeat and headline UFC 300 against Pereira. That would be my only claim with it. But I'll never argue against seeing those two fight.
No, that definitely crossed my mind. I just thought star power. I think you just need that star power in the top area. Like I said earlier, I don't think Jones is coming back. Conor McGregor, who the hell knows? Yeah, I mean, if Conor McGregor suddenly jumps in and they change it to 300, then yeah, he naturally tops the bill. And then you have the
Definitely
problem.
headlines.
You have the problem with the rest of the card, right? So yeah, I think that for me was the logical one to go with. I mean, John and I have both got Leon and Bilal in the co-main. Yeah, I mean, Nathan, when you sent it over to me, you did say it wasn't in any particular order, but I'd imagine that's where you'd have it as well.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I got the Pereira Hill fight, but just because, I don't think Jamal Hill's going to be a million miles off. And if he's back and if he's fit, the Pereira fight makes sense. We're still talking another 3 months from now. So there is time for if Jamal Hill's back, he's fit, he's training, he's going to come straight back into the title picture. So that was my reason for having that one. I mean, as for your guys, it's funny because I don't think any of us would have picked Leon versus Bilal to be on this card, apart from the fact that Leon has said the UFC have told him it's happening.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that's why we've all chucked that in.
Yeah, and to be fair, when I ordered yours, Nathan, in terms of this, I put it weight class specific. That's why it is ordered like that, because that's how the UFC tend to do it. So I just want to throw that out there just so that nobody thinks that Nathan's a bit odd. But that's the way I chose to rank it. Go on, John. You were going to jump in there. Sorry, mate.
Sorry. I was thinking we're going more like logical sense, like whoever. So if you're thinking like, okay, so middleweight titles on the line in January, February, it's featherweight, March, it's the bantamweight. So if you're thinking who's left, yeah, light heavyweights there. Heavyweight is injury prone with Jones. Middleweight just defended. Welterweight, he fought in December, healthy. Bilal weighed in as well at the same day, so he could be ready as well. Lightweight, Dana announced yesterday with an injury. We have a title eliminator. Like I said, featherweight defending in February. Bantamweight in March. Flyweight maybe if Pantoja is ready, and then we have probably all the women's division fights as well could be on this card as well. So I just think on a logical perspective, Leon and Bilal seem ready after both weighing in December. Leon taking minimal damage, Bilal announcing he's in a fight camp. Leon's in good shape, good fit. He could definitely come back in April, which is 3.5 months from now.
Like Nathan said there, Leon said it's happening, so that's the fight to happen, and I think it does make sense just have an extra title fight on there. Next one I want to jump to is DDP and Adesanya, Nathan. So you obviously think DDP is going to beat Strickland, and then you have Adesanya coming back. I'm
going to contradict myself here because what I was saying was I can't see Izzy coming back to face Pereira off the back of a loss, but I'm going to say I do see him coming in to face Dricus off the back of a loss. But yeah, I do. I think Dricus beat Sean Strickland. I actually think he might run straight through Sean Strickland, if I'm completely honest. And then I think we do get the Adesanya fight because that, for me, and maybe that's your headliner in all seriousness, because there's a bit of bad blood between them. It was building and building and building. It was going to happen, and then Sean Strickland beat Izzy, and it all just went to shit. But I think if Dricus goes out and beats Sean Strickland, then that's the fight. And the difference is, I've not put that as the main event. I've tried to put it further down the card because it's still a banger of a fight.
Yeah. But in terms of weight classes, yeah, you've got light heavyweight and heavyweight on top, so it makes sense that's where it would go. Absolutely, I would love to see that fight. I think the caveat with it, and what I remember them talking about, was UFC Africa, and they're very, very keen to try and do that. Are they gonna, if that fight is gonna happen,
the rematch?
Are they gonna? Yeah, maybe the rematch. They do it in Africa, definitely. Yeah, I could see if Strickland or DDP win that pay-per-view that John is going to. By the way, congratulations for getting your tickets. We'll be doing this podcast when you're sleeping homeless on the street because you've spent all your money getting on tickets to go to 297. But that's good. That's great to hear it, man. I'm sure you'll really, really enjoy it. So, yeah, I think whatever happens in that fight, middleweight makes sense if either of them can turn around in that much time. John, you obviously don't think middleweight. I mean, you don't have Pereira, you don't have Adesanya. Do you just not think that's anywhere that they're not going to go with any of those guys?
I don't know. I just don't. DDP fighting in January, depending how much damage he gets, will he be ready in April? Because
damage against Sean Strickland.
Who knows? Well, look at Izzy. He made Izzy not fight for a while. We haven't seen Emma not fight for a while. We haven't seen who did he fight in in the
Abus.
Apex. Yeah, Abus, has he fought since?
Yeah, he fought in Brazil.
Oh, it's Brazil, right? But UC didn't look good, so I don't know.
Yeah.
I just don't think. Like again, it's just a bunch of question marks with Izzy. If is he ready? Is he gonna fight early this year? I do agree with you, Nathan, about like Izzy. He won't face Pereira because he's coming off a loss to Sean Strickland, and I do think he needs a win. And I don't see Izzy fighting anything other than for the title. So it would make sense DDP versus Izzy, but he needs that win at middleweight before he moves up to light heavyweight and gets a crack at Pereira again.
Yeah,
I went with Zhang
Mm-hmm.
and Yan. I think two Chinese fighters for the belt will be massive for China. They'll if they try and get Chinese audience, they'll definitely tune in. Wei Li hasn't fought since that Boston card, I believe, so it's due. She's exciting. If we looked at UC 200, Nunes headlined that card, so I don't see why not Wei Li could fight
Mm-hmm.
at UC 300. Just a massive fight, I think, for that division as well, especially for it to move on. A lot of moving parts as well, because a lot more contenders are going on, and we had a at our prediction card, we had a few. We didn't have Wheelie as only I had Wheelie as a champion. And you guys had somebody different, so it's time. It's time for that the belt to be defended. That's why I had it as my featured or third fight
I
of
mean,
the card.
yeah, I think that's definitely the fight. I think Zhang and Yan will be next. I know there were rumblings, weren't there, about doing the UFC in China, and that's kind of the reason I've avoided.
But who knows when that's gonna happen? Like they were supposed to be the Song Yadong Chris Gutierrez card, and then it moved to the Apex. So I don't know
Yeah,
what's happening with China, especially like with all the
yeah.
trade war with the US and China. So I don't know how much it could happen. But nevertheless, I think it could still happen at UC 300. It will still be big for Chinese fans in China in general. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's just a big fight.
See, I'm going to go contrary to that. I've obviously chosen Jung to go up and fight Grasso, because for the very reason we're talking about that China fight. If you do that fight in China, you do Zhang and Yan in China, the same reason you try and do DDP and Izzy in Africa, because that's the audience, that's where they're from, and you can really push the market in that area by doing that fight there. So I think you have Zhang try and move up because it's she doesn't lose that flyweight that strawweight belt if she loses that fight, and she has the chance to become a double champ. Obviously, the risk there is that okay, well, does she do an Amanda Nunes and come back down and defend at strawweight, or does she stay at flyweight? Do you do her and Valentina? Creates another whole can of worms. But I was just thinking from a logical perspective, try and get that fight in China, Zhang and Yan Xiaonan. I do agree, John, though it is overdue. Like even Yan
Mm-hmm.
Xiaonan, her fight was still a little while ago as well. I don't know if she fought before or after Zhang
It's
Wei Li
Dern.
last year. When was that though?
That was an Apex main event live. Like I don't remember if I
Yeah,
can look it up
exactly.
really quickly, but it's been a while. Like both these fighters have been shelved for a while.
So it is due.
So
Yeah,
it
I
is
absolutely
due.
agree.
It is due, especially with the contenders are moving up in that rank in the rankings there
Mm-hmm.
too. It has to
Yep.
be the belt has to be moved around.
Yeah,
So
Tatiana Suarez as well coming up. I just think it's. I think again, I think
yeah,
it's another layup super fight that they can make. Get Jung to
Yeah.
move up. They've talked about it. I'm pretty sure they went back and forth on social media, Jung and Grasso and the UFC. They're not done with stuff like that. They can pick it up.
Mhm.
Nathan, you've gone Grasso and Shevchenko. Again, I think it's a pretty
Yeah.
simple fight to make, right?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I said in one of the previous episodes, I think Grasso and Zhang will happen probably later on in the year. Um, I mean, obviously, we move down to your other featured one. You've gone for Holloway and Gaethje as that one's chucked in there. We talked about Bilal and Leon. Obviously, the Oliveira Sarukian fight that John's picked. I mean, what a great fight that is.
What a
hell
crack,
yeah.
yeah.
Absolute. And I've just seen as well that I think they've got Arman Sarukian as a favourite
Oh yeah.
for that,
Is that so?
which for me is quite surprising because I'm not sure. I like Sarukian, but Charles Oliveira is a dangerous man. But
Very.
yeah, for the opener, I've got obviously Grasso and Shevchenko in there. I just think that the fact that we've kind of not heard anything about the rematch in a long time normally means there's something coming. And I think, they've obviously got the card in Mexico, haven't they? Which, Grasso's not going to be on there. I know Brandon Moreno's on, Yair Rodriguez, Ortega, those fights. So I just think this is one that's, like you said, it's quite easy to make. You make the trilogy, you chuck it on there. It's a big fight to throw in the mixer as well.
Yeah, and I think having, like you said, exactly, the Mexico City card doesn't have Alexa Grasso on it, which is the natural one. You do. I mean, Jon, you've not gone for Alexa Grasso on your card. Any reason you didn't bring her in as another championship fight?
I think she's I don't know. It could be too far for UFC Noche again, the second one that's happening. They definitely want a Mexican champion to headline that. So they might just save her for that, because unless Moreno gets a title shot, Rosas Jr. is too far from it. I don't think maybe Pantoja, if he gets a spectacular win versus Ortega, could jump up the line, the queue, and go for the featherweight belt, especially if Volkanovski keeps it. We literally just saw that fight and how easy he destroyed him. So my reasoning is because UFC Noche needs a Mexican champion to headline, and Grasso is the safe pick.
Yeah, I think out of the Mexican fighters, she is the safe pick. Nathan, I'll leave it to you to decide how you fancy these openers between mine and Nathan's. Mine and Jon, sorry. What are you going with?
Well,
Usman and Shavkat or Yuri and Rakic?
Well, obviously we've got Yuri and Rakic. That's booked, isn't it? I think it's an interesting fight. I said something last week, which I'll probably live to regret, which was that I think Alexander Rakic can actually be in title contention. We've not seen anything too much of him of late, but I just feel like he's got a bit of a nullifying style, which Yuri might have trouble with, being as kind of erratic as he is. The style that he's got, I think it's a good fight. I think it's an interesting fight. I think Usman and Shavkat interest me more as a fight. I think that's incredible. I think we're not really sure what's happening with Kamaru Usman, and I've not got him being on this card, but I wouldn't be at all surprised to see him. The only thing I would say, the caveat to this was that I know Shavkat had an injury, didn't he? So I don't know how far off he is being fit for this.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. And I mean, yeah, from the picks you've made there, Jon, I think Yuri and Rakic is your best opener from what you have. So do we have any more thoughts on these main cards? I mean, if you had to pick someone other than your own, who would you pick?
Honestly, like, Nathan's card's a banger. I would love to see all those fights, but I just think
and unrealistic.
Exactly, a little bit, yes. If you were in COUC and you made that happen, I don't know what I'd do. Just so many bangers on. It looks amazing. I don't know Bilal being on the card, but I would love it. Taylor, your card is also a banger. Like, you have BMF, you have Grasso moving up. Zhang moving up. Izzy coming back, one of my favorite fighters, and Shavkat, who must see TV. You can't go wrong here, boys. I think you can't go wrong here, but I would go with Nathan because it's so unrealistic. But
it's what we all want. Yeah. No, I think if I was to choose, I would choose Taylor's. I think if I was putting money on whose was going to happen, I would pick Jon's. Not necessarily the ordering as such, but obviously Yuri Rakic is confirmed. We've got Oliveira, Sarukian, Leon and Bilal's all but nailed on. You're right with the Zhang thing. I think she's got to come back sometime soon, and I actually do think Holloway versus Gaethje probably ends up on this card too. Maybe the order's a little bit off. As for kind of super fights, I think Pereira Izzy 3 interests me more with Gaethje and Holloway underneath that. Zhang moving up, like I said, I think that's going to happen at some point, and Shavkat definitely getting another testing. So, but yeah, I mean, obviously I'd pick my own. But if I had to pick somebody else's.
As for me, I would. Similar to what Jon said, man. I mean, I think Nathan's card is the one that gets me, that gets my spider senses tingling. And Jon's is the most realistic and the most down to earth. So yeah, for that reason, I think I prefer to see Nathan's, but I think Jon's is the one that's going to happen.
Do you know, my problem is I look at UFC 299 and especially with the announcement that we had today.
Yes. Mhm.
It's
And I
ridiculous.
think if you're going to make UFC 300 big, you're going to have to go big now because there's some
Yeah.
incredible fights on that card.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a bit of a narrative I wanted to do before we go down to these kind of prelimy fights. Do you think any of those retired guys are going to come back in a kind of not freak fight, but a no USADA, that kind of thing? You know, a George St. Pierre, Brock Lesnar, Ronda Rousey, all these names that are getting floated. What do you guys think on that one?
I was thinking Brock Lesnar versus Fedor Emelianenko. Maybe it could happen if like we had our own fun fight to pick. That's the only guy I could see Lesnar coming back, kind of. GSP, I don't think he's ever fighting again unless they throw him a boatload of money versus Khabib. But my pick would have been Lesnar coming out of WWE style, not announced. You know, he's like mystery fighter, fighting
Royal
Fedor
Rumble.
Emelianenko. Exactly. Coming back and just having like bang, that's the card. That's the fight we're having today.
Maybe that's it. Maybe GSP versus Khabib is the headliner. It's I don't think we'll see any of them. I don't think Ronda Rousey ever steps back in the octagon. She was never the same after getting a couple of pacings back to back and disappeared off. You know, I think that, with all due respect, I think that talks about a certain level of mentality and where she wants to be. As for your Brock Lesnar's, you know, yes, okay, USADA's gone, but I have to believe that, you know, there's still an element of a modicum of integrity in this sport. So I don't think we'll see Brock back. Yeah, I just don't. You might see a grappling match between Khabib and GSP, you know, somewhere in the middle, just as a bit of a fun breakup. But I just don't really see any of that happen. I think even though it's a kind of a celebratory event, I just expect to see normal fights that we'd expect between currently active fighters.
Yeah, I think the only one for me, the only person I could see coming back is Nate. I think Nate's the only one they could lure back in there. As to who he fights,
Well, I honestly expect I would have, if it hadn't been for the news today, or for us today, probably yesterday for John, but you know, I would have picked Dustin Poirier and Nate Diaz on this card.
Yeah,
but
so would I.
obviously, you know, Dustin's taking on Benoit Saint Denis, so he's not going to be. That's 299, isn't it, as well? So
With Poirier and Oliveira being underdogs announced, I just see a parlay money coming in right now.
Yep, you and me both.
Big time. So these fights, the rest of the fights that we have, a big one that jumps out for me on your guys' cards is that there is a fighter here I've never heard of, John. And I don't know if this is a mistype or a mistake or I'm just not as well informed as I thought I was. Who the hell is fighting Derek Lewis? I'm not even going to try and pronounce it. Is this some Canadian guy that's just going to come out of nowhere? What's the crack here?
If you remember a few weeks ago, UFC signed this 6'7" Cuban wrestler heavyweight that has a 4-second knockout in his last fight. I think what a way to introduce him at UFC 300. He is.
Okay.
Let me just pull up his stats because it's pretty amazing. He's like 4-0 in his young MMA career. He has his total fight time. Let me just see. It's 6 seconds, minute and 50. Oh, sorry, 6 minute and 6 seconds, 12 seconds, 3 seconds, and 4 seconds, all coming by way of knockouts.
Envy Derek Lewis would be a lot of fun.
Yes, exactly. I think what a way to introduce him straight into the rankings if he wins, obviously. Good way to introduce him. 6'7" Cuban guy. We know how those Cubans are built over there. What a better way to start. What a better way to introduce him to the UFC, especially as a fan favorite. Derek Lewis could take that hype, and if Lewis knocks him out, who can complain about that? So
I love
his
you,
full
Derek.
name.
I love you, Derek.
His name is Robelis Despain. His nickname is the Big Boy. I think that fits perfectly. Some of these nicknames are just to the T, perfect. He looks like kind of like Derek Brunson, but he's with the blonde hair. He dyed his hair blonde. Jacked, former, I believe he's a gold medalist in the Olympics too. So if you don't know him, and now you know.
If you don't know, now you know. Dana White
Right.
over there.
Yeah.
Right, Nathan. Let's go through your picks. I know you've got to shoot off pretty quickly. So obviously we talked about Gaethje and Holloway, but run us through the rest. The Costa one I'm interested in because he's booked against Robert Whittaker in, I want to say, February. So what are we seeing there?
Is he?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Well, I
Or
mean,
is
it
it
wouldn't be the
coming?
first time he's avoided a fight with Robert Whittaker, so I guess we'll see. But I mean, there's just been some beef between those two, so I thought that would be a fun one in there, wasn't it? I must have missed the Whittaker Costa one being booked. I know it was meant to be booked originally, wasn't it? And then I think Costa pulled out or pulled out negotiations at the last minute. But yeah, I mean, I'll just go through the rest. I thought that Jessica Andrade would be a fun addition to UFC 300. Always brings the violence between multiple weight divisions. And Marina Rodriguez looked great last time out, and will be looking to move up the rankings. So there's an opportunity there for two big hitters, if you like, to go toe to toe. Like I said, we've touched on Hamzat and Costa. Hamzat, I think, will be part of UFC 300. I know he's been ill, but I do think he'll be in that. I think he's the kind of big name that you can throw in that doesn't have to be in a title fight, but adds the value that they may be looking for. Same can be said for Ian Gary. I think Ian Gary's, whether you like him, loathe him, whichever way you choose to go with Ian Gary, he is a big name. He will draw eyes. He will bring attention. And I think win or lose to Jack Della Maddalena, I think Gilbert Burns will happily turn around for the right man. Whether he comes off a loss, I think it's still a big name for Ian Gary to take on. I think if he wins, it might still be a case of Ian Gary gets the shot just because it's UFC 300, but we'll see with that one. I just thought Ian Gary will feature in some way, shape, or form, and I'd love to see him in against Gilbert Burns. Cody Garbrandt returned with
This is a
a
hell of a fight.
devastating knockout. I was tempted to put Cody Garbrandt against Dominic Cruz on here, but I went with the Figgy shout because that's who Garbrandt called for. He said the UFC liked it, so it would be an interesting one. And then we all know that Jim Miller's going to feature on this card. That as long as he's, whether he wins or loses in the matchup that he's got coming up in the next, is this month? Is it Jim
This
Miller?
week.
The first fights, yeah.
So I think regardless of whether he wins or loses, as long as he comes to unscathed, we'll see Jim Miller at UFC 300. If he wins, I think put him in with Paddy. I think Paddy, I would say that Jim Miller right now is a harder fight than Tony Ferguson. The rankings or where you would sort of put Jim Miller in relation to Tony Ferguson might have been a little bit, you would have Tony higher because he's gradually working his way down. But I think that's the kind of matchup, with all due respect. I think Paddy could find himself in some trouble there, but I think it's a huge fight for Jim Miller and a nice payday for him as well against Paddy. And then the last one I've got there was Manel Cap, despite me saying last week that I thought he was going to lose to Mateus Nicolau. I think him against Kai Kara France, that's been building. I don't think Kai's got a fight booked, has he? So there is a chance for Manel Cap to have a quick turnaround there as well and jump in with Kai Kara France, which I think would pull plenty of eyeballs as well. Like I said, I have got a shoot, but what I will do is just point out a couple on your guys' cards.
That's what I was going to ask you to do as well, yeah.
John's trying to get Chase Hooper killed. That was the one. I like the Emmett Chikadze fight. From yours, Taylor, the Holly Holm Misha Tate. I think as far as name value goes, I think if you're looking for further down the card, I think that's a belter to have on there at this stage of the career. And I think the Dan Hooker versus Jim Miller thing, I'll just reverse what I said for John. I don't know if you're trying to get Jim Miller killed or I think it's a very, very violent fight, that one for sure. But I just don't know if that's the fight you give Jim Miller. And I'm
No.
not too sure Dan Hooker takes that fight either, just because I think he's looking, to reclimb the rankings. But fun fights, I do like them. I like the list you've got, and you've got the Aljo Calvin Kattar fight there, which I think will be a fun one because Cater's a big dude in comparison to, you're moving up in weight. He's not small for the weight class, so it's definitely an interesting one for Aljo moving up. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I expect Bo Nickel to do Bo Nickel, and I think that's me. So on that note,
Top man.
I'll leave you guys to close out, and I'll catch you all next time.
Cheers. Thank you very much, Nathan. Appreciate you, mate.
Cheers, boys.
See ya.
So let's dive in a little bit. I mean, I really like I like Nathan's fights a lot. I think Nathan has gone very fantastical and very fantasy like anyway.
Yeah.
With some of his fights. I mean, he's looking at quite a few quick turnaround. Jim Miller being one, Manel Cap being one, Gary
Burns, yeah.
But they're all really
Costa.
fun fights. They are all really, really fun fights. Again, Gaethje Holloway at the top of that. Who knows? Who knows? I mean, we've all got that fight, just in different positions. I think the best one out of that bunch though is probably from an entertainment point of view. I don't know actually. Two of them, Hamzat and Costa, and Figgy and Garbrandt for me are the two most entertaining fights that I would really, really love to see. I think Hamzat and Costa is the most unlikely one because of that Robert Whittaker booking. I don't know if you had a moment to check if it is official, because I've obviously got the screen sharing here, but while you do,
it is the co-main of Volkanovski versus Topuria.
Okay, yeah, so there's not going to be that turnaround, is it? Because that's early February, right?
That's February, around Valentine's Day, I believe.
Yeah, that either the weekend before or the weekend after. So, yeah, I mean, Costa, just to get Paulo Costa to fight is hard enough. To get him to turn around.
It's not the co-main; it's the featured of UFC 298. It's Merab and Henry Cejudo is the co-main, and Robert Whittaker versus Costa is going right before that.
Oh, sick card. Yeah, I mean, it's hard enough to get Costa to fight anyway, let alone get him to turn around in the space of 2 months. I just don't think, unless he starts with Costa right in the first, Whittaker right in the first round. And those fights against Robert Whittaker, they're not easy fights. Nobody comes out of those unless your name is Dricus du Plessis. Nobody comes out of those kind of healthy and looking good. So, exactly. Yeah, I mean, what do you think about Nathan's before we kind of just chat about each other?
Well, like I said, I like Nathan's. It's just very unrealistic because of turnarounds. Can you imagine Gaethje versus Holloway as the featured prelim? That'll be just bananas before going to 5 title shots.
I know, right? 5 title fights. And then you throw, because if that's a BMF, that's a 5-rounder, right? You do a 5-rounder at the top of the prelim.
It has to be. If it's Nathan, this UFC card is gonna go for 12 hours long.
I was just thinking
everybody's
that as well,
5 rounds, right?
The main card 5 rounds.
Yeah. Look, me and Nathan always go back and forth. I have nothing bad to say. This card is a banger, just a bit unrealistic. Gary and Burns are fighting at 298 and 299. Costa's fighting at 298. Hamzat was also sick recently with the pictures he posted and then deleted. So I don't know health-wise how ready he is. Cap fighting in January. He could definitely fight in April after as well, especially with him and the beef he has with Kai Kara France.
Yeah.
Everything else looks pretty realistic. Andrade and Rodriguez. Gaethje Holloway, we've talked about it so much. Paddy versus Miller. I think that's the only fight we have that it's not killing one of the fighters.
Yeah.
Figgy and Garbrandt, that could be a banger too because they fought pretty close in their last fights, and Garbrandt moving up. Figgy moving up at bantamweight, and they're talking about making this a title shot at flyweight once upon a time.
Yeah. So, yeah, I like it. I like it a lot. I mean, in terms of our cards, I think you've got 1, 2, 3 of your fights haven't been booked, right? Unless Emmett and Chikadze has been though, because
No, no,
Chikadze's
no.
booked. Is Chikadze on a card? Or was he just supposed to be on a card? I'm confused.
So Emmett and Chikaze were supposed to fight at the Leon Edwards, and
That's it. Yeah,
right,
296.
Chikaze got
Yeah.
injured. So I feel
Uh-huh.
like UFC might rebook it. I just have a feeling they might rebook
Makes
it,
sense.
and both kickboxers, Emmett, spectacular knockout. We know Giga's kickboxing credentials and how good he is. So who
Yeah.
would want, I don't know who would want to see that fight, especially Alger and Cater is confirmed for that as well, and their featherweight. Did you see legs doing these tournament style kind of like, oh, winner of this and winner of that on the same card could fight next.
Yeah.
So I
They
could see
like to
that.
line stuff up.
I was excited for that fight too when it was announced for you for was it UC 296. So unfortunately, Chikaze got an injury. Emmett got a spectacular knockout. His stock can be higher. A rematch would make sense. Oh, not a rematch. A rebook for that fight
Rebooking,
would
yeah.
make a lot of sense for me.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, I mean, as soon as you said about that Cuban guy, it clicked. I just didn't really know his name. I think that makes really good sense actually for this card. Derek Lewis is, he's a company man. He does always bring it. I mean, his last fight, he didn't really take any damage. Jelton Almeida just sat on top of him really for 5 rounds. Was that September, October, November? Whenever it was, I think it might have been October, right? Down there in Brazil. I feel like it was recent, but not that recent. Because it was before Aspinall fought in New York anyway. So I
Right.
really like that fight. I really like the Emmett Chikadze fight. Actually, I think that's a really smart fight that you've rebooked there, and I think it would fit in perfectly as well. It's a great prelim fight that you're looking at it and saying, "Oh wow, okay, yeah, that could be worthy of a main card on another pay-per-view." Is it UFC 300 material on a main card? No, I don't think it is. But everyone's expectations for UFC 300 are absolutely at the moon in terms of levels of what we're expecting. So
Everyone's hyping up UC 300 like it's going to be this unbelievable 12 all fighters will be champion, all champions will be fighting. So it's
yeah,
hard to be that. That's why, like, again, I know my card isn't as sexy, but like I feel like it's realistic to me, and I feel like even if you saw this as UC 300, you still be like, wow, every fight is a potential banger.
yeah, totally. I mean, with mine, I've just added really 2 on to the ones that we already know are booked. And I was obviously thinking about Jim Miller. He's got to be in there. And I
Uh-huh.
just thought of opponents, and the only guy that jumped into my head was Dan Hooker. I like the Paddy one as well. I don't know whether they're going to be saving Paddy because he did talk about his wife giving birth around that time, and he said
Exactly. Yeah.
there
True.
was no way on this planet that is going to miss that. So I think he said it was like by a couple of days or something. So yeah, I would like to see Paddy versus Miller. I think that'd be a really fun fight. But I've kept that in my mind, and I thought, yeah, Dan Hooker, Jim Miller, it'd just be a great fight. I do think Hooker would take it. I think Hooker's that type of guy. It's something he would look to be on. Is a card like this. I can't think who he was booked against. Was it Turner? Was it Jalen Turner he was booked against? No, because
Who
he beat Turner.
who are you talking about?
Hooker,
Miller?
Dan Hooker was booked to get to
Oh,
fight someone, but because of his
Bobby
arm, he
Green.
had to pull out. Bobby Green, okay. You could remake that fight for this card.
Oh yeah,
Definitely.
absolutely.
Oh
I
yeah.
think you could
Oh
throw in
yeah.
Hooker with anybody. Like
Yeah. And
that'll be
it's doing things. So yeah, that's why I put Hooker in there. And Home versus Tate, I think it just makes sense. I think if you're looking to get some name value on there, neither of those two, Home's coming off a loss. She's ranked 4 or 5 at the moment.
for
And
longest of time she's been ranked like top
I
five.
know, right? She's always been top 5.
Yeah.
And Tate is just outside the top 10, or maybe she's just creeped into the top 10 after her last victory. So I think for Tate, it
But
makes a lot of sense because
and
she
she looked
can
amazing.
climb. Yeah, she looked amazing, and she can climb back into the title contention. You beat Holly Holm, and your next fight's probably going to be for the belt, right? Or somebody in and around there. I think with a name like Misha Tate, you could definitely sell it that she fights for the belt next. So for me, that fight makes a lot of sense, and I think it's another one of those slam dunks for the UFC where it just makes sense to book it. I think both of them would take it, and I think it'd be pretty entertaining as well. I
The
can't
only
remember the
reason
first fight.
the
Go
only
on.
reason I would disagree is I feel like they would save that for a UFC Apex main event as a fight night.
Possibly, yeah,
5 rounds. Like they love throwing Holly Holmes on the main main event of Apex card,
Yeah.
and just calling that a fight night. So that's the only reason I would say it won't be happening on UFC 200. But it's again a banger fight. Tate looked amazing in her last fight, and I would like to see her if she could continue on that momentum, especially with Holm, and get jump the queue as well and get title shot, especially as being on the line in a week.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I disagree with that slightly. I think, yes, Holly Holm seems to be now an Apex headliner against an up and comer. But I think when you throw in the Misha Tate factor, I think it becomes almost a bit too big. It's almost a bit of a waste to have that fight at the Apex, I think. It seems like they are going in a direction with their Apex fights, and it seems like either mid to low level ranked contenders or veterans against up and comers. That seems to be what they're doing. So that was my thought, and I don't think it headlines the fight night. It would fit on another pay per view. That second fight on a pay per view, I think, is a nice slot for it as well. Unless your pay per view is $299 or $300, I don't think it fits on either of those. So yeah, I think that would be a good fight. Hey, is it? For me, that's a random order. I probably wouldn't have that as the prelim headliner. I would have Oliveira and Zarukian as my.
I was gonna ask
headliner.
about that. Like, do you really think?
Order.
Yeah, do you think Oliveira and Zarukian being the second fight on the prelims as a title eliminator, with Oliveira being a former champion and one of the exciting fighters being second fight?
Yeah, no, that's not going to happen. Yeah, I mean, I would have Oliveira and Zarukian, probably Oliveira, Zarukian, Yuri Rakic, and then Aljo Keita, and then Home Tate.
All former champions too, so they have to be somewhere near fighting in that one after the other in that order. I think we could all agree we'd be good as a CEO as a matchmaker. We make bangers.
I mean, it can't be that hard of a job, really, can it? I mean, honestly, especially an event like this. Like, if you have it all there on the wall, you have who's injured, then you've got the fights that are booked, who's not booked. You just have to really know the outsider guys, right? Like, your top 20 to 30 guys, your top 30 to 40 guys in every division, and girls obviously as well, and then what's coming through and who's exciting. But hey, if that's your full-time job, you're laughing, because there's no other sport where that happens, right? There's no other sport where three individuals, so who is it? It's Dana, Hunter, and
Shelby.
And Shelby, so four guys, right?
Yeah.
That sit there and do this. There's no other sport like it where four people pick the fights that happen, right? And then the rankings are just thrown out to a load of journalists. Like, it's a crazy way to do it, but it's amazing because look at what we get.
Exactly.
Right, look at what we get, and look at what happens. So, kind of final couple of words I want to have on this is just from your point of view, do you see there being a Conor McGregor U-turn and he ends up headlining UFC 300?
Do I hope there's going to be a Conor McGregor U-turn? Yes. Do I think there is one? I don't know. Even when USADA was here, they wouldn't allow him fight in April. And even with the new drug testing company they have, I don't think they'll let him fight in April as well. If they could like somehow pay him off and make slap on Diaz and Conor 3 here, main event right after BMF, what better? And can you imagine all the shit talking with Gaethje on the same card as Conor?
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure Sterling would say something, and Oliveira wanted to fight Conor for the longest of times.
Yeah, they'd all pop up. Leon
too. Yeah, Leon, like a payday, and how massive would that be for the UK?
Yeah.
So I don't see it happening. I think, like Conor said, it would happen at National Fight Week. Is also a big card usually on National Fight Week. I don't see it at 185 either. I think it's going to be 170 max. But yeah, as to your question, no, I don't see Conor doing a U-turn and fighting 300, but I would really love to.
Yeah, I think the only way it does happen, because I think the UFC have been pretty adamant, and I was listening to Luke Thomas, who and he broke it down like this, and he said, from a business perspective, you don't do Conor on 300 because 300 doesn't really. It does matter what fights you put on there, but it has a good chance to sell well anyway. and
True.
because of the ESPN deal that they have, their pay-per-view model isn't necessarily as important as it was for them. Whereas you put Conor on his own card, and you know it's going to do a million more
Pay-per-view
pay-per-view buys,
buzz.
right?
Yeah.
So from a business perspective, and I appreciated that point of view from
Yeah.
Luke Thomas, and I thought that was the right perception. So I'm with you. I kind of, yeah, I don't hope that he's on this, because I want to see those other people come out as stars, because there's going to be a lot of eyeballs on this card, and there's a lot of underappreciated fighters. You know, if we had it your way and we had Gaethje and Holloway as that main event, it's incredible for those two guys, because they are two of the most exciting and hardcore fan favorite fighters that we have, that aren't really massive stars. You know, Holloway certainly more than Gaethje, I would say.
Just because he's been here longer in LA.
Yeah, exactly. And Holloway's kind of built up himself. You know, he's just the way he's out there in the public eye. He's got his YouTube, he does Twitch streaming as well and things like
Right.
that. You know, you'd also get the eyeballs. You get the eyeballs on somebody like a Leon Edwards. I mean, I'm convinced he's going to put on a masterclass against Bilal. I think it's going to be his
Yes.
best performance. And you get people
Absolutely.
like Oliveira and Zarukian and Yuri and people like that. I think putting a Conor on it takes the shine off of those guys. And I think if you're the UFC looking to build future stars, you don't put Conor on this card, and you save it for later on. The next question I wanted to ask you is, the final question to wrap up is, we are very, very, very optimistic that the card will end up like this. So, do you think it's going to end up similar to this? And what is your kind of minimum expectation where you don't look at it and say, oh, well, that's a bit of a letdown?
Um, I'll be a little biased. I think yes, it will kind of look like mine. My minimal expectation is have 3 title fights, and I would
Okay.
include BMF as a title fight, because we see when like UFC came back from COVID, in that Florida card we had 3 title fights with Usman, Whaley and versus Rose, and then Shevchenko. With the bigger fight cards have 3 title fights. I think that's what we're gonna see happen, and especially with a title eliminator with Oliveira and Sarukian, which we confirmed by Dana, it makes a lot of sense for title eliminator, 3 title fights, and it would line up together, especially with Oliveira and Gaethje on the card with Sarukian, little tournament happening with the lightweight division there. And the other also thing I don't see is a lot of big names being in the prelims and early prelims, because you don't see a lot of them, right? You want more eyeballs on them. So I would agree with like Aljo being the featured prelim. Is like, okay, everybody watches the featured prelim just to get into the pay-per-view, especially it's on ESPN, so a lot of people watch that. And then everybody else is more like fun up-and-comer fight. So like with Emmett Chikadze, a fun fight. Lewis versus Despain. You know, Despain, you want to introduce him. Bo Nico, we know he's on the card, and he's massive
Prospect.
contender prospect. Yeah, everybody, you want to see Nico fight, especially he only fought like 16 seconds in the UFC altogether. Miller, you have to throw him on there. That's my expectation. I need to see Miller on that card.
So Jim Miller and three title fights. Yeah, I mean, I'm in agreement with you, but what I want to add to that is I want to see a rivalry on there. I want to see something that's going to get us talking. I want to see something that's gonna, just get that anticipation really up there, and 2 guys that are going to push it and that are going to promote it. Because Leon and Bilal, honestly, really,
a little rivalry, kind of.
Yeah, but will that bring a casual in? Will that bring, that real excitement? It doesn't for me, to be honest. It doesn't. I'd much rather
that's because
see
of one of the fighters.
Yeah, I mean, but we've also, like, from my perspective, we've seen this before. Leon has jumped up 5 levels. Bilal probably jumped up 2 levels, maybe, in terms of his level of performance. And we've seen how that first round went. Like I said, I think it's going to be a masterclass. That's kind of almost why I put Pereira and Izzy on there, because it's a bit of a rivalry. It's something that will get us talking. It's something that has a real narrative behind it. Those other fights really don't have too much of a narrative because they haven't fought each other. Some of them, they're coming from a weight class below. You look at Zhang and Holloway, for example, they'd be fighting somebody up a weight class they haven't really fought before. They're not going to have too much going back and forth. I think we need a bit more of that intrigue and a bit more of that excitement. I think you get that with DDP and Adesanya. You obviously have Jones and Miocic there with Nathan's card. That's why I think your card is a little bit light on that real fire that gets these big cards going. But like I said in our preview show, whichever one it was, there's not that many of them around at the moment. There's only really a handful of really big rivalries, and they're only really, if you go back in history, I suppose there's only so many of them anyway at any one time. That's what I'd like to see.
I think for name value, like even for the casual, they would know Gaethje, one of the most exciting fighters. They would know Holloway. They would definitely know Leon, especially with that head kick went viral. Oliveira, people know him. Yuri, I'm assuming that they would know the basics, like he was a champion. They definitely know on your card Usman. They would definitely know Pereira and Izzy. So it's just more like you guys stack up with a lot of good names.
Yeah.
But obviously you don't have like a super hardcore big name like Conor, Izzy, O'Malley.
Yeah. Exciting stuff though. I mean, I guess we're starting to find out. I mean, there was obviously the big announcement yesterday, about Oliveira and Zarukian, and also that Makhachev is sitting back, which to me signals that Gaethje is going to be on this card because you don't leave Justin Gaethje sitting around. And it will have been, when did he fight Poirier, in the summer? Or was it August or September?
July.
It was International Fight Week, right?
I don't know if it was International Fight Week because it wasn't in Vegas, was it?
Good question.
I do know they did fight in July. They did fight in July.
Yeah, so you don't leave Gaethje on the sidelines for almost a year. Max Holloway's been out for a while, so that fight seems to look for me to happen.
And also, just to mention, the BMF belt has always been the featured on the main event on a pay-per-view. So I just think it beats out Leon and Bilal because Bilal's name won't sell as much, I would say. Kind of.
If that's the thing, because if it beats out Bilal and Leon, you do kind of devalue a UFC title if you're having an essentially a made-up belt as the main event, right? That was originally a bit of a gimmick between Jorge Masvidal and Nate Diaz. It just kind of came out of nowhere, and people jumped on it. So I don't know. Yeah, I'm skeptical about whether the UFC would do that.
Going more for excitement, I would say then. Going more for excitement because Leon Bilal's like a serious fight, but Gaethje and Holloway is gonna be a banger fight.
Yeah. It's true. It's true.
You want guaranteed fireworks? You put Gaethje and Holloway as your main event.
Yeah. Well, that's also the conundrum aspect, I guess, with Gaethje going into this card is: do you put that BMF belt on the line, or do you just have it as a regular fight? I guess with what Dana said, that Zarukian and Oliveira, because if Zarukian wins, he's leapfrogging Justin Gaethje.
Yes.
Leapfrogging Justin Gaethje, because there's no, we had the discussion at some point that Gaethje probably does deserve it over Oliveira to get the next title shot. So in theory, judging by what the fan opinion is, and I haven't really heard it any different anywhere else. Those Ariel Hawani's, Luke Thomas, Bisping, the Fight Disciples, they all pretty much say they think Gaethje's next. Whoever wins that fight leapfrogs Justin Gaethje at the moment. And then you've also got Poirier and Benoit Saint Denis. So then it's like, okay, well, the lightweight conundrum continues, right? Because where does Gaethje fit into that? So I think the only logical part to do it is BMF. So maybe you won't be right.
I keep forgetting they announced Poirier and Benoit Saint Denis, and that's just a banger fight. And then that's obviously trying to make BDS leapfrog division and have a different top 5. But that
exactly.
would be. I feel like you have to have Gaethje on that card at the end of the day. Like if you're not getting a superstar name, you're getting a big name. Gaethje's there.
Yeah,
and it's lightweight. I keep saying you can't go wrong with lightweights. And for the storyline. Oliveira's already there, and Tsarukian is gonna leapfrog if he wins. Dana confirmed that. So just storyline with them three going. Gaethje, he's gonna get on the mic and he's gonna say some shit to them. So it's storylines, excitement.
Yeah, they've got to do something for Gaethje. But anyway, my man, thank you very much for your time. You'll be back later this week with Nathan previewing the inevitable rise of Magomed Ankalaev. As I've correctly predicted it, he will be the champ by 2024. And if he wins, you better believe I'm not going to shut up about that. I don't like my pick, but it's out there. It's out there. So
I'm gonna make fun of
Let's
you.
not go there.
After.
Let's not go there. You save it for when I'm not there to defend myself. When you chat to Nathan later in the week. So Nathan and John will be back. We'll be back later this week for the preview of the first fight night of the year, and then they'll be back to review it next week as well. So thank you all for kind of tuning in for this UFC 300 fantasy chat between myself, John, and Nathan, and we will see you all next time. John, thank you very much for your time, mate. Appreciate it as always.
No worries. Have fun, guys. Thanks for watching.